you're a nerd, you have no friends, you're like a social outcast.
Like, so if you're not going to kill yourself,
What
are
are you
you just
going
going
to
to
do?
stay in this limbo? Like, I didn't really have many friends in
At
school.
least human friends.
Yeah, not human friends, but I did have a praying mantis who was the only member of my bug club other than myself. I don't know why I had such like a shame and embarrassment about showing myself too much. And like it was just ridiculous how high I was on that plane. Oh, I just love books. I'm talking like soul level. If I put makeup on that day or whatever, I could say some outlandish stuff and people are like, oh, cool.
But
Like,
if you don't, you're like a weird
yeah,
creep.
then if I don't, they're like, okay. Oh my God. Okay, this is like feminine literature core.
Yeah. I'm gonna roll on this one. All right. Well, I don't know if we'll air that part, but
No,
that's pretty typical of our interactions.
that's just
Um,
me being judgmental.
Episode whatever of A Passionate Inquiry.
Yay.
And this might be the most interesting for me at least.
Okay.
Because you're the one person in the world who's hopefully going to be around for like the whole ride, you know?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
hopefully your friends and like other people that have been on
of
are going to be
course.
there
Yeah,
for the long
you never
run.
know,
But I
right?
do get what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's been cool. I don't know if you felt, I'm sure you felt it as well, but the last kind of few years
Hmm.
gone from like back in the day just being a bully of you in like childhood
Yeah,
siblings
now I
to
can judge you as well.
exactly. Now you've
Now
got
I
some
have
ammo.
some, yeah, I have some, what's the phrase? Footing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. No, you're doing well. I think you're a not to get too sentimental, but I think you're a super
We just
interesting
started.
person.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm
Five
keen
seconds
to,
in.
I mean, I obviously know your story from a unique perspective, but also don't know your story from perspectives
I
as well that
also
other people
don't,
might.
I don't really share much.
Mm,
Like, it's probably maybe 3 to 5 people who know much of my storyline, if that. Like,
yeah,
with that, it was like barely even.
you're a bit of a
So,
mystical figure.
no, I just, when are you supposed to bring this up? Like, oh, by the way, this,
Yeah,
is something, people, like, if I'm asked, sure.
sure.
But I'm not just the type to,
Okay, so let's delve in then.
okay, not scary at
Let's
all.
reveal it to as many people bother to click on this link.
Amazing.
Um,
Exactly how I envision spending Thursday.
yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Now, for context, the present day version of Charlotte is very different to if we wind back the clock 5, 10, even 15 years.
Yeah.
Present day, I mean, obviously, model, like,
I'm not a model. I'm literally not a model.
but you're in a pretty good spot in life, I
Yeah.
think. You're a
I'm like the
20-year-old,
happiest I've ever been by
the
far.
happy 20-year-old girl in a loving relationship with family and friends, doing a thing,
Mhm.
studying a bit, working a bit. You're
Mhm.
in a good spot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now,
Definitely.
how far back should we go to start the story
I
of
reckon it
getting to here?
has to start. You've started your other podcast like asking about like a synopsis
Hmm.
of their life. So I won't go like too in depth,
Yeah.
but I feel like it always has to start. Everything is from childhood. Like it kind of has to start that way. So as a kid, as you knew me, but I honestly was just thinking about this, how I just did not like being a kid at all. Um,
Yeah.
I really, really despised almost like the whole concept of being a kid.
Okay. Yeah,
And you couldn't pay me to do it again.
first of all, what was the whole concept of being a kid in your eyes?
In my eyes, it was like the adults were on a pedestal and then the kids were below them, even though now as an adult, I don't see it like that at all. But this is just how I interpreted it. Like even small things like the kids menu at a restaurant. I was like, why would I get nuggets and chips and you get scallops and stuff? I was like, this is discrimination.
Oh,
So
okay.
I
Yeah.
really saw it as like society targeting me for being like less than, and like no one would listen to my opinions, no one would take me seriously. No one would just like, I just always idolized the concept of being an adult and like I could choose what I wanted to wear and choose how I wanted to talk and act and everything. Because to me, being a kid was just everyone put you in the category automatically of you're just a kid.
Okay.
And even like things like you have to listen to this because you're a kid, because you're automatically, you
I'll just
know,
check the camera angle. We'll put them on. Cool. Yeah.
so my favorite sort of things as a kid were reading books. I definitely liked that. But also just listening to adult conversations. I feel like our mum just took us around to different things. Like she didn't sort of put her life on pause as I've seen other parents do. It's like she kind of just brought us into her life, which I actually, looking back, liked because if I sat at a table, yes, no one would have taken me seriously if I did talk, and they probably would have thought it was cute and stuff like that. But then so instead of talking, I just learned that listening to those adult conversations was really enjoyable. And that's where I got a lot of insight and, yeah, just a lot of knowledge from listening and observing adults because I wanted to be one desperately.
Mm. What do you think when you were a kid? What do you think in your head was the gap between, okay, the world sees me as a kid. I want to be an adult, but did you feel like you were an adult or?
Almost. I almost felt like I was acting as a kid, like it was a performance sort of thing. It was very weird mindset, as in, like, I definitely look back and, like, I wasn't as smart as an adult or, like, had life experiences like an adult. But it's almost like like a lot of kids that you talk to, they have this, like, inherent wisdom that you're kind of just born with. Like, not saying it's like a special thing, just I think a lot of kids have it and it can be dimmed by them just being categorized as a kid that doesn't know any better.
Mm,
Whereas, like, now, if I look at kids, you can see that they'll just have a different perspective on things and it's not right or wrong. It just hasn't been molded by society yet into what it should be. So then it's actually, they can be
yeah,
just as
right.
smart, but it might be in a different way or whatnot. So I just felt, I think, as a kid that I didn't belong really in either
Either camp.
or. Yeah. And so I just wasn't very comfortable as a kid. And I liked doing adult things. Like we used to watch The Big Bang Theory and Two and a Half Men
Mm,
and things like that with dad on the couch. And I liked those. I wanted to do that. And even like Disney Channel, I didn't watch many cartoons. I watched like Hannah Montana, which is still adulty in my eyes as a kid. It's
yeah.
still people much older than me doing
Okay.
adulty things like having boyfriends and going shopping and whatnot. So that was very much what I enjoyed. But then, so at school, I was definitely like a bit of a weird kid,
Yeah, I
which,
remember I hadn't thought about this for a long time,
yeah.
but tell us about Bug Club.
Yeah, so so I didn't really have many friends in
At
school.
least human friends.
Yeah, not human friends, but I did have a praying mantis who was the only member of my bug club other than myself. Um, yeah, so I
Wait, so logistically,
I just
did this
started
praying
it.
mantis was he around for like a day, or did you have in a box, or
No, he just like hung around this area of the playground that no one.
for multiple days or
Well,
weeks?
like probably not that long, but in my head, like 2 or 3 days was long enough to start a
Okay,
connection.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was like a corner of the playground that no one else was in. Everyone was playing cops and robbers and stuff like that. I was like very, very rarely included in that. So then I would go to the library and I still remember some of the books I read. I read a lot of history books. The more adulty I could, like, that seems to be a theme. I would read about, Mary Queen of Scots and things like that.
And
When
how
I
old are
was,
you?
this was like year 3 and 4, I would
Okay,
say.
so 10-ish.
Yeah, like 8 or 9,
Yeah.
because yeah, this was, yeah, year 3 or 4. And so yeah, a lot of books, a lot of bugs. My favorite color was green, and I had a bob, little wiry
I still
glasses.
remember going to Just Cuts in
Yes,
Doncaster,
with
and
our grandma.
yeah, and you getting that bob haircut.
Yeah.
That's the most ridiculous looking thing.
It's literally was like this and
Who
this.
was it in Scooby Doo? Velma.
Yeah, but it was worse. I would much rather like this was like the Julia Billard, like the Gillard? Wait,
Julia, yeah, yeah, I
is
know.
her
You're
name
Prime
Billard
Minister of
or Gillard?
Australia, Julia Gillard, I think.
Julia Gillard. I said Billard. Haircut, like
Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
yeah, and little glasses, like the really grandma rectangle wire ones that were purple, and I had a plate in the top of my mouth, so I had a lisp, which did not help at all. I was also really bad at maths, which also didn't help because we had in class those like times table where you had to be timed, and everyone would do them and then stare at me because I was still on question two and couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, I think I could do the times tables.
Okay,
But
cool.
yeah, I just, yeah. So that was primary school. Then I moved schools because I moved from Sacre-Cœur to St. James in the end of year four,
Mm.
going into year five. So I had 5 and 6 at St. James. And I remember those summer holidays, I decided to do a transformation. I was like, I have to be one of these like Disney Channel, like cool, like fit in. Basically, I thought I was like becoming a teenager at 10.
Yeah.
So I grew my bob out to long hair. I got like plain black glasses that I still kind of didn't wear. I still to this day don't wear glasses. I
Okay.
will rather go blind because it just makes me feel
Like a kid and not an adult.
kind of like not as much like a kid, just like people are going to perceive me differently. Like
Okay.
how I perceive myself with glasses is a very different person,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of probably from that stage. But yeah, so I also that Christmas I asked for like Kiki K books for like the cool things. So I was like, I need Kiki K notebook and I want Seed Heritage clothes because like I don't know what clothes I was wearing, but I would work around the house with pocket money. With mum would give us some pocket money for doing chores. So I would do that and go to Target. And I remember this like pink lace top that I thought would be really cool.
Yeah.
So then I went to St. James and it worked. It was
So
fine.
you've gone from being Bob Cut, nerd girl, bug club in up till about 10 years old
Yeah.
to then switch schools and over summer, was it?
Yeah, I like consciously made the effort that
Okay.
this
And
was
and
an
your models were kind of Disney Channel, Hannah Montana.
well, like yes, but also I just wanted to fit in with what the girls I knew were kind of
Okay.
doing,
So
or
the cool
like
girls in school you were leaving, you were like, I'm gonna model them into
yeah.
this new
And I
school.
had an orientation day at St. James,
Okay.
I remember before,
Yeah.
and I kind of sussed what was
What was
happening.
the fashion?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I kind of wanted to
So you went in
see.
as like the bob hair, but no one would have noticed you like that, and then you
Yeah,
came back to the
no. But
actual start
everyone
school
was also a lot friendlier at that school in
because it
general.
was co-ed and not all girls as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there were 3 boys in the
Okay.
class, but
Yeah.
it was co-ed, but it just seemed a lot friendlier. Like
Okay.
Sacre-Cœur was not that friendly at all. Um, but yeah, so that was that, and then I went to Star of the Sea for high school, which was fine, and then I became not fine, not because of school. I just didn't like school
Yeah.
in general, but I also just, I don't know, got some mental illnesses
Yeah.
happen.
And I think so. So if we sum up like childhood stuff, it's a bit of a story of being a bit of an outcast as your true self, perhaps,
Mm,
and not really knowing how to fit that in. So then putting on a
mm,
lot of surface level stuff
yeah.
to then
Which
fit
I
in.
don't think is also like that bad. Like
Yeah.
you could see it as like, oh, you're losing your authenticity or whatever, but I was a lot happier
Okay.
being well, it wasn't that non-authentic. It was just different, and
You could at
just
least
trying to
operate
fit
in those
in.
circles and then
Yeah.
still be your true self.
Yeah, I could at least like I could have my personality. I just might not have like looked like, you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
just you have to understand how kids work, and it's just that's like how society works in general as well.
Yeah.
You can be more yourself if you're more digestible to people as well.
Okay.
You can kind of then you can let your personality show after you are palatable to
That's a really interesting idea.
yeah, like I find that if you like, even just like going, if I put makeup on that day or whatever, I could say some outlandish stuff and people are like, oh, cool.
But
Like,
if you don't, you're like a weak
yeah,
face.
then if
Like,
I don't, they're like, okay.
yeah,
So,
right.
like, it's, yeah. It's
That's
a
super,
thing.
and that goes all the way back to primary schools and stuff.
Yeah, like I just picked that up quite early on, I think, is like how you present yourself on initial basis is kind of like first impressions are kind of everything. And then after that, you can kind of do whatever as long as people have an initial idea like, oh, she's good. And then you can kind of say whatever
Okay.
and
And after
people.
that, you can kind of have any level as long as it's well intentioned, any
Yeah,
level of anything.
yeah,
Yeah. Because people write off those first impressions. I mean, that's what
yeah.
they kind of see your first impression and they attach all sorts of
Mm,
storylines from other people and other places and other conditionings
yeah,
onto you and onto your first impression. And that can go in your favor or it can go
yeah.
against you. Right.
And it's just like, it's not like a bad manipulation. It's just like I'm going to do this consciously because it will benefit me. But
Yeah.
it's a bit of a psychology
So for
trick, I
me,
think.
I think I've been resentful of that fact all
Okay,
my
yeah.
life. I've said this before, but I always said like I'm anti feathers.
Yeah.
Like I'm anti like showing off
Yeah.
in a way and like presenting yourself in certain ways. It's almost a good filter that if you don't see through that initial first impression that might not be optimal, if
Mm.
you can't take the patience to see through that, you don't deserve it, what you find
Yeah,
on the
I
other
get
side.
that as well.
But that's also to my own detriment as well,
Yeah.
because you miss out on those people who it might not be that they're not patient, but there's so many
Mm.
good things, good people, good stuff.
Yeah.
You need that initial marketing almost.
Yeah.
Do you think like being a girl that's even more strongly thrown in your face?
Yeah, I think so. People just have, I think, a lot more maybe boxes, like categories. I feel like if you're a guy, in my perspective at least, it's like if you're, say, a nerdy guy, they wouldn't be shocked if you were also athletic or went to the gym necessarily. It would kind of be like, oh, he's just a guy. He has interests and hobbies. Like he can like video games and go in the gym.
Hmm.
Whereas I feel like if you're a gym girl, you're a gym girl. And if you're like a
Okay.
nerdy girl, you're a nerdy girl. And if you're, you know, then if you're like a basic girl, then you're a basic girl. And if you like did something non-basic, it's like revolutionary.
That's really true, isn't it?
Yeah. So I feel like it's like a lot more like categorized.
And I think
Whereas men are more like, oh, he does this because he's a guy, so he's a human. So it's almost like more human in a way, perceived that they're more like all rounded and
now that's mental because you're absolutely right. I think that also helps girls in a almost in a dating sense because as soon as you can show that you've got more than one track,
mm.
you're instantly more attractive than everyone
Yeah,
else.
but all girls do.
Right, right. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean, though.
Yeah.
Like any guy can show you three, four, five tracks, but if he's not like really good at one of them, he might just be one of the
Mm.
guys. Whereas if a girl is like a basic girl taking photos of a cafe brunch on the weekend, but then
I love
also
a cafe. Sorry.
yeah, also
Love a
studies
cafe
classics,
brunch.
it's like
Yeah.
suddenly or sings or something. Suddenly it's like, oh, you're different.
Yeah.
You're not like the rest of the
A lot of
girls.
these things as well, if you're conscious of them, I feel like as a girl, if you're conscious of these things and how people perceive you and learning that, then it you can use it as a tool. Like as you said in the dating game, then you can just immediately market yourself as I am more interesting than this one box, blah blah blah
Multifaceted.
blah. But it's not like rocket science. I think it's just something that maybe it's because I'm less naturally sociable, like I'm quite naturally not comfortable that I kind of just
You've had to learn it from theory.
yeah, I literally just like naturally just adapted how do people do this and then kind of
Kind of looked and studied like from the
yeah,
library.
not like not like
Well, you
studied.
kind of did it that summer though, right?
I mean kind of, but yeah, then it just naturally flowed as like little points in my head. But it
Yeah.
never really was like
Okay,
this
so
is
let
the first time I've said it that it actually has become an
okay,
idea in my
cool.
head. It kind of just was a natural
So
thing.
before we move into further stuff, if you, if anyone in any position in life is kind of feeling they're a bit of that nerd girl, like
Mm,
got a lot of potential, why aren't people seeing this? How can I not lose myself but navigate a bit better through the world and its social situations?
mm,
What advice could you possibly give them?
God. Well, I feel like what I've said is bad. Like, oh, just ditch all your authenticity. No, I don't mean that. But like, have your interests and have your hobbies. But just like people are quite, people are just naturally self absorbed and they don't want to have, as you said, the patience and time to really like delve deep. If they see something as complicated or just too much for their palate on first hand, then they probably won't, they'll just move on.
Yeah.
So if you want to make friends or want to do this thing, then just like have some compromise, I guess, with like other people, like be yourself while also not being a people pleaser,
Mm.
but like, asking just, I don't know how to articulate it, but say you want to be friends with someone and she has a hobby,
Mm.
then maybe you start to get interested in that hobby as well as your own hobbies, and then you can share that hobby, and then maybe she'll like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's just being more not saying nerdy is not pleasing to people, but just from my experience, it's just like you can't be very stubborn
In your own
in
track,
your
'cause
own track, because then you're like, oh, well, the right people will come to me. But sometimes, like, you just have to be open minded, I guess.
you go
And,
out
like,
and find
yeah,
them.
because there's other people who are in not the nerdy category, but other categories who also you might be like, well, I don't want to talk to a gym person because I'm not a gym person. It's like, but if that gym person was like suddenly posting about a praying mantis, maybe you'd
Yeah.
actually be like, I want to be
So,
friends with
so,
them.
like, and is there a version of you? And I know this is when you were super young, but you can kind of apply it now. Is there a version of you that instead of changing that at least front that you offer the world,
Mm.
made the front of the bugs and the library books and stuff, made that your front and just made it more sexy? Like, could you imagine being like,
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like what I've adjusted to now is like I'll be a lot more myself now, but that's because I already have established like friends and things like that. Like I don't feel excluded or
yeah,
unhappy or unsatisfied with literally any aspect of my life.
okay, cool.
That now I'll do
You'll
whatever
push it
I
out there
want.
and you'll
Yeah.
lead the charge for those things that otherwise don't have, you know?
Yeah, and like I will just be more authentic. And I've also kind of grown out of some things and grown into other things. Like now I would say obviously my fashion sense has changed since I was 10. I don't think anyone has a good fashion sense when they're 10.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like things like that. I think I am more authentic to myself a lot
Sure,
more now.
yeah.
And so that version of me kind of came back out. And like I'll be more comfortable wearing my glasses maybe now than I was in high school. Like I went years without wearing, like I actually could not see.
Yeah.
Um, like,
That's cool.
and I
So,
didn't pick up a book for
wow, and that's wild
years.
to think that now what you're doing is so interlinked with that. So essentially, just to break it down, you're a nerd, you have no friends, you're like a social outcast. Now, instead of just getting angry at the world for not appreciating you and what you're into and
Mm.
enjoying you, you should take the moment to put yourself out of yourself
Yeah, I
and
think it's just
realize I need to make myself a bit more palatable. That might mean compromise. That might mean a bit of
that's
sacrifice
how
to
to
get there.
articulate it. Yeah.
Go into that and then leverage what your
Yeah.
newfound
It's just use
confidence.
things as tools. Like
Mm,
everyone has challenges, but it's like instead of just, yeah, feeling sorry for yourself, it's how do I approach this challenge in a way that's actually going to benefit me in the long run? Because, yeah,
cool. All right.
that's
Now,
that.
we've got to, maybe because of this whole sacrifice yourself, those to a slight degree, we're pretty depressed.
Maybe, I don't know. But yeah,
First of all, paint the picture. Like, what was going on?
I actually don't know how it necessarily happened. It almost felt like I woke up one day and like was a completely different person, but I don't think that's what actually happened. But because it was kind of a while ago and my memory is a bit fogged from some things that also occurred during that
Substances?
time. Yeah, should I just say?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, like I was using quite heavily weed
Yeah.
for many years, and I wasn't really like addicted to other things or anything.
Mm.
Like I wasn't, doing meth or something, but I was, yeah, smoking a lot. And so my memory
It's
of
just a
that time
cloud, right?
period
Like,
is
it's
a bit of
just,
like, I don't know when it started. I don't know quite what happened. I know like it's kind of time frames, but I was just basically like out of it the entire time.
that's so wild, that drug, hey?
Yeah, like and it was like morning until night. Like
Mm.
genuinely, I think for maybe 2 years straight, there would have been a very, very limited time where I was sober at all, if that. And when you are sober, like if you've been smoking that much, then you're still a bit hazy. Like it
Yeah.
would take a while to actually really like get clear headed. So yeah, there was like 2 or 3 years of just
And this is how old are you in those years?
it's probably 15 to 18, I'd say. Like yeah. And so yeah, year 9 was probably when I started, like the very end of year 9. Not really. I think it was like end of year 9 is when I first tried it, but when like depression, all that started was year 10 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know. Then I went on antidepressants, and
Do you have a take on antidepressants? Do you have a
I
preference
think
there?
they helped me quite a
Mm-hmm.
bit. I think that when I was actually taking them regularly, I think for a depressed person, it's very hard to actually take your antidepressants regularly a lot of
Okay.
the time
Yeah.
as well. So I would say
They just taste bad, or
no, it's just like any functioning thing as a human was kind of difficult. So doing that at the same time, and also because I was high all the time, like how am I going to remember to take my medications? So I would say for taking them, as you should, as advised by your doctor, then
and because as someone who everyone feels very sad, everyone feels all these emotions, right? So the saddest moment of my life is relative to the saddest moment of your life, but someone I don't think has been close to depression. Can you just help me understand what that even is? Like,
I would say it's literally like, I think most things are like how everything's viewed is just perception, but it's just like if everything was perceived in, I would say, like almost indifference. Like it's not necessarily like, yes, everything is a lot more pessimistic and negative, but also I just think the main thing is just a lack of care for absolutely anything. Like I'm talking anything you can think of is just like an indifference. I do not care about it. And it's like just for me, it was just numbness,
mm,
just so numb, but in the way that just makes you feel. Then you feel guilty about being numb, and then you're like, I don't actually care about anyone. I don't care about anything. I've lost all my interest, all my desires, will to live, all of this gone. But then you feel guilty about that because you see, your family in the kitchen and you're like, no offense, couldn't give a fuck.
so because like I feel that logically you would know what you're supposed to feel like.
Mm,
And then if you're not feeling that and there's this huge gap in between what you know
yeah,
you're supposed to be sensing and what you're sensing actually is nothing,
yeah.
this
It's
would be
just
very
like
strange.
it literally just like a void of like dark nothingness is how I describe it. It's waking up every day and being like, first thought is like, God, I woke up again. Like, that's shit.
Mm,
And then once you've already had that thought, getting yourself out of bed when you didn't even want to wake up is like, why am I doing this?
mm.
And then you're just like, why would I do that? And then you just stop caring about anything.
So what actually gets you to brush your teeth and what gets you
Yeah,
to
exactly. That's
go to work or
literally,
school?
I would say, the biggest
It's
thing
just a
is
habit, like,
no, it's just shame.
yeah.
You are ashamed and you feel shame. Like I would say the emotions I did feel when I was depressed, it was a lot less shame than usual because I think shame is quite a strong emotion, like embarrassment and shame and all that. But you don't want to go to school and have someone think your hygiene is bad.
Hmm.
So it's that like those sorts of
But then you
things,
are
negative
caring
things that
about them,
drive
right?
you. Yeah, but it's just in like you're caring about some things, but like not enough at all. Like
Hmm.
it would still be like I wouldn't care about people's judgments, but it would be like, no one wants to go to school not showered for like 4 days. I don't know. It would just be also it's a girls' school. Like they're gonna you just don't also I didn't want to draw attention to myself. Like I was very
It's going to be almost easier to just get in the shower
yeah,
than it is to not get in the shower multiple days in a row and have to deal with all the societal consequences of it.
exactly. Like you kind of just
So
it's
what's the
not
easiest route,
yeah.
essentially?
Yeah. How's the way I can get through this hellhole that I call life, and
Yeah.
then how can I do this without rustling any leaves? I don't want to be, I almost didn't want to be noticed. Like, I would have loved in that time period for everyone I've ever loved or care about to like forget me, just everything to just disappear. Like, that's genuinely what I craved.
Do you think that's because saying it like that, suicide makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, you just want, like, it's not, because people will be like, but what about the people you love? And it's like, yeah, but I wish they didn't love me. Like, because then it would be easier for me if they didn't care, that would be a blessing because then I could do what I want. But because they do care, then I feel bad.
Yeah.
And then I'm carrying guilt that they love me, even though I'm just like this. And then it's so much like self hate and self talk. Like, I can't even fathom the amount of like, and then that springs into like commonly, well, for me, it was like eating disorder as well. Because when you're talking self hate and then you're doing routine things like eating food, then that hate goes on to everything that
Okay.
you're doing and can control in your life.
Right. Wow. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, good though. Like I think the more we speak about this, the more because people feel like I connect with that story,
Mm,
but I can't connect 100 to 100, but
mm.
I might be able to connect 20
Yeah.
to 100, you know?
I mean, everyone has like those days and those experiences. And it's just like, I, now that I'm so far out of that mindset, like looking back in it is like, how could I be in that? But then I feel so bad for people who are in that and
So
you
what are the
can't help.
I know you said it was a long time ago and the weed was a factor, but what do you think got you into that spiral, into that hole?
Mm,
Or how could you have avoided it, or how could circumstances have avoided that?
I honestly don't really know. I would just say like,
Because for example, my mind goes, and this is all theory.
yeah,
This is stuff I've just ingested through the internet and Jordan Peterson and stuff like this.
mm,
But basically, the thing goes that life is just pain and suffering.
mm,
And that's what you were feeling. You were basically only feeling that,
yeah,
right? Because I think life, if you draw it down, is really hard, really difficult. You have to get up, you have to take on the world. You have all these pressures and love and
mm,
hate and blah blah blah. So there's a serious question. Well, why do you bother? Right? Why don't you just go
yeah.
to the abyss like you're kind of
And
doing
I would
before?
question that a
Yeah.
lot. Why I would look at, sorry to interrupt, but I would look at people on the street and if they were having a difficult day, I could see like someone tipped over a mug. I'm like, why do you have the will to live right now? Like, I
Mm.
would genuinely look at them like, how are you happy and have the will to live?
Yeah. And I think life is obviously all the negatives, pain and suffering. And the only antidote against that is meaning,
Mm,
is yes, because we're still going to spill mugs. We're still not going to wake up. We're still, all this stuff is always going to exist, whether you're depressed or not, right?
yeah.
So you basically just have to counter the scales
Yeah.
and have something that's good enough that
Mm.
makes it worth dealing with all
Yeah,
that shit.
I almost see it like an air mattress of like, not an air mattress, but like it makes everything lighter and feel a lot less difficult. And like almost now I'm in such a good place in my life that I don't even feel like much suffering or
Mm.
negative
It's not like
things.
those things aren't
Yeah, and
happening.
it's not like they aren't happening, but it's like there's a something
It's
lifting
a
and
breaking sort of.
helping.
Yeah, it's
Um,
countering the scales. And
yeah,
I think when you describe depression, my mind paints an image of the normal burdens of life that everyone carries. And yes, there's a bit of a spiral effect that they kind of get worse because you're now failing school and all this stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But essentially, it's what everyone has. It's
Mm,
just that you don't have anything to weigh against and
yeah,
lighten the load.
yeah,
Um, what someone like Jordan Peterson kind of says to everyone who's listening, young men really attached to the story, is you have to have meaning. And the way to get meaning is to take on responsibility.
yeah. I would
So
agree with that.
how you would agree with that?
Yeah,
Like, is
I
that
would agree with that. I would say, yeah, to a degree, responsibility is really important. Even like a lot of the reason why depressed people, I think, don't, kill themselves or do something like that is because of the responsibility of if there's family or friends that are there. Like, even being, say, a sibling or a daughter is in some regards a responsibility
yeah?
that sometimes that can be the only string that's like holding someone.
Mm,
Um,
yeah, wow. That's pretty
yeah.
cool. So yeah, what was your like path? Actually, first of all, yeah, no, what was your path out? Like,
I would
if that
say,
is responsibility is the
yeah.
answer, how did it happen?
Well, I would say so. I went to live abroad,
Okay.
which helped a lot. Because I stopped smoking weed as much, couldn't afford groceries, let alone weed. I smoked maybe too many cigarettes because I was living in France, but like that was fine because it wasn't altering my brain chemistry as much.
Hmm.
So my antidepressants, I got a bit more um,
Regular, huh?
disciplined, yeah, with, and then stopped smoking as much weed and had more purpose because I was doing things I really wanted to do. I felt like I was living in that Disney Channel,
Okay.
like I had my clothes and my I felt like I was back to the child thing, like I was finally out of school, which I hated school, mainly also because of that spiraling effect is like because I was depressed, I didn't do any work, didn't do any study, didn't care about anything. Therefore,
So you get.
everyone at school, the teachers hated me. I didn't want to rock up because
Mm.
yeah. Um and also it was a lot of effort, like bus and train to school and like all
Yeah.
of that. I was like, I can fuck right
Yeah.
now. So sometimes I just wouldn't go. My attendance was shocking. Um, and yeah, so then went to Europe and it didn't like happen overnight where I just like woke up in Paris and suddenly I'm happy. Like, no, there was a lot of like, because I was living on my own for a lot as well, I really, really loved living on my own. And yes, there could have been, I knew that as well from a kid. I knew that I would love being an adult girl living on my own. And I was in Paris as an adult studying fashion marketing on my own in a little apartment. I was like, dream has come true. And it felt like that. Like I was genuinely satisfied. I know that's kind of almost rare when people get what their goal is and then they don't feel that satisfaction.
Hmm.
I really did feel it though, but I still had lingering like mental illness. It
Yeah.
doesn't just go away. So, and I still think that it's like something that I have to work on. It's like a maintenance thing
Yeah.
that I still have to work on. But I you came to Paris actually, you
Mm.
and Zav.
Yeah.
Really, I actually see this moment as pivotal.
Really?
Yeah, like
Actually, I think I remember what you're gonna say.
yeah,
Go on.
so genuinely like Zav's already been on one of the
He was the first
podcasts.
episode.
Yeah, first episode. So
He's a pretty wise fella, huh?
yeah. So you and wait, you and him,
Yeah.
yeah, is that grammatically?
Sure.
Stayed on my floor in my
Hmm.
apartment, and
Just for a few days, right?
yeah, like just for a few days, really casual. But I remember walking around Paris, and we were sitting in the grass by the Louvre, and you guys were talking about your 5 year plans. And at this point, I still wasn't past the stage of depression where I had thought of 5 years in advance. I was like still in that kind of state of like, I don't know if I'm going to live till next week, let alone like I still don't know how far I can push this.
Yeah.
So then you guys were talking about 5 year plans, but it kind of sparked something in me. And I was like, 5 years? I've never thought about 5 years.
Hmm.
Like, this hasn't, I'm thinking about how to survive the day, let alone 5 years. And so you guys were talking about it. And then when I kind of almost opened up, and I hadn't been very vulnerable with anyone about anything, but I kind of just had this moment when you guys were talking about it, and you are quite like vulnerable people with talking to each other and things like that. So I felt like it was safe for me to be like, you know what? I actually haven't thought of 5 years. I have basically been depressed this whole time. This is like, and I kind of just mentioned that. And then you guys were sort of talking, and then you especially were sort of like saying, well, it's either you have a plan and you move forward with life and like get better and recover. This is how I interpreted what you said. Or you just don't and like you stay in this suffering and like maybe you die and whatever and it's just all doom and
I'm
gloom.
pretty sure I was pretty. I
Yeah,
remember that I was pretty hard. Like,
you were very hard, but it's what I needed to hear.
mm,
And I think a lot of people tiptoe because they see someone who's so close to like, they're so scared of like, oh my God, this person, you know, could do something drastic and they could do all this, that they tiptoe around it. But what I think a lot of people actually need to hear if they're going through that is like a reality check of like, because they're not in reality. They're in this
mm.
like, their own perception of reality that just isn't reality, if that makes sense. So having a reality check that brings them into it being like, no, you either die or you do this. And it's like, And that really helped me because I was like, okay, well, there's some reason that I'm still here and I must have ties to something because I haven't died yet. So
Yeah.
therefore, I'm just going to take that and like a ladder. I'm going to take one thing that is keeping me here and then like rings on the ladder. I'm going to like slowly, find that one thing. Like maybe I like, even simple, I liked cigarettes at the time. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm like, I wouldn't want to be without smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
and then it would be like one thing that I liked. And then I started writing down lists of everything that I liked,
Hmm.
which really helped me. So I was like, I love the color pink. It's like, I
Okay.
don't want to be in a place where there's no pink.
Yeah, the abyss. There's no
Yeah.
pink there.
Yeah. Like, what? So it was like little things like that, which would just like make me realize that I did like a lot of things, that I liked walking past enough flowers and I liked baguettes and croissants. I was in Paris at the time, so obviously there was a lot to like as
Yeah.
well. So that helped me a lot because there's so much beauty and I really love beautiful things. So then all that beauty and that atmosphere of that city really, really helped me and inspired me
Okay.
of like, this is life and this is amazing because there is such a life and vibrancy in Paris as well.
Yeah. Well,
And so
especially in
much
summer as
yeah,
well.
so much beauty, so much everything that like I think it was the best place for me to be to really appreciate and then start valuing my life and people's lives and what life is and then finding meanings and
Yeah.
blah blah blah.
And again, like it's a funny image that even from a kid, you hated being a kid, you wanted to be an adult. And the fact that you were just thrown into being a kid and however you got there and there's weed and there's like, all girls schools and blah, 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 and you're just whole. But as soon as you get out,
Mm.
suddenly you're an adult and you're living this basically a teenage Disney
Yeah.
movie. Literally Emily in Paris is one of the most
Yeah.
popular
I was watching it
shows, and
last night.
it's
Season
literally
4.
you, right?
Yeah.
So it's cool that there are paths out. Do you think that if you had grown up and mum wasn't who she is and allowed you those certain opportunities and stuff, do you see yourself having found a path out if you were, say, stuck in Melbourne and maybe not able to travel overseas, or at least the way you did, or um, do you see other pathways out for you? Or is that
I
really
would
the only one?
say if I had picked up books quicker,
Okay.
sooner, that would have helped a lot, I think. Like that, I only started reading again when I was in Europe, and it was when I was starting to come out of
Okay.
the hole. And when I started reading again, that like just
Yeah.
very quickly helped me recover because obviously there was a lot of like there was a lot of also like with every recovering sort of thing, there's a lot of relapse of things. So I would
Mm.
say be good for a week and then suddenly I would scull a whole bottle of red wine in my room alone and like
Yeah. Great.
just like chain smoke 2 packs of cigarettes and like call it a day and have the messiest apartment with like dishes stacked
Yeah.
up to the ceiling almost and like
And so, yeah, because like anything, you go and you have all this motivation, but you haven't had the time to make it. And I think this is what the pills help for. You haven't had
mm,
the time to make a habit and a discipline.
yeah,
So you kind of have a motivation for however long, and then you
yeah,
scroll back yo-yo. It's like a yo-yo, and you
yeah,
hopefully get better and better and better with each repetition until they're so far
mm,
apart that you have built the disciplines and the habits, and they just
mm-hmm,
become your actions. It's really interesting. Another thing, and again, I think everyone's pretty interested in depression because most people, I think, are lying to themselves if they don't have a sense that they're not on the edge, but it's in them.
yeah.
Um,
It's in
I think it's in everyone.
on.
Yeah.
Even if, like all the podcasts I've been hearing you talk about, it's a very, very common
Oh, 100. I
reoccurrence.
don't think there's been an episode where we haven't spoken about it.
Yeah, it's just so prevalent and it's also so dangerous and detrimental because so
Yeah.
many people die from it.
There's one episode we haven't talked about it, and that guy's a different character. um, but another definition of depression I've heard around the grapevine is that it's a real tunnel vision. It's a
Mm,
lack of perspective.
yeah.
And a few things, it's interesting. Ethan, for instance, said that he had a similar moment, kind of crunch time moment. Like,
Mm.
I hate my life, but I'm not going to kill myself. So what do I
Yeah,
do?
that's
And
literally
that's
what
kind
you
of
basically told me. You were
exactly
like, so if you're not going to kill yourself,
what are
are
you
you
going
just
to
going to
do?
stay in this limbo? Like,
Yeah. And I think there's a mixture of that. And then there's a process of breaking out, almost like chains, breaking chains off your narrow perspective.
hmm
And that's what you did in Paris because you suddenly are able to smell the flowers and all this stuff. But the books are another thing. Um, getting onto I'm not trying to like advocate, but psychedelics are often involved in this as well, like for
mm,
a lot of people I've met. and they're using that in studies now on depression
Yeah,
because
isn't microdosing a
yeah, because
huge thing now?
what
Yeah.
happens biochemically is neuroplasticity. And
Mm,
that's when you're a kid, you're super open to perspectives, right?
yeah,
That's why you're so
yeah, yeah.
malleable.
Yeah.
And then you close, and a person with depression has one of the least neuroplastic brains
Mm,
there are.
I could so
It
see
makes
that
sense, right? You're just
because
so
you're so
stuck.
stubborn. Like,
Yeah.
I remember just being depressed and being so stubborn. If someone tried to help me, I would resent them. I would hate them.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I started just hating mum and like everyone who cared.
sure. So anything like books allow a new perspective.
Mm,
But if you're not stubborn enough to read the book,
yeah,
right? Or maybe
yeah.
antidepressants, maybe that's a bit of what they're doing. Psychedelics certainly doing that, and the studies now are kind of wild.
Mm.
Obviously, you can probably go too deep and hard into the psychedelics, or you probably can't go too deep and hard into books.
I
So,
don't
so
know. There's some pretty fucked books.
but like,
I'm reading a really strange one right now
really,
that
yeah.
I like. I'm concerned for the
So,
author.
so I don't say that as a kind of quick fix guaranteed tool,
Mm,
but it's interesting because I think what they're all doing the same thing, and it's crunch time call to action because you actually see the lay of the land and realize what you have to do is act in a different way. And how do I act in a different way? I need to take on a new perspective, open up my perspective,
yeah,
and travel, psychedelics, books, all this stuff really seems to
yeah.
the
I
pathway.
don't know what would have happened. Like if I stayed in Melbourne, I think I actually don't know because just before I left was like also such a low point. I
Mm,
remember the morning before I got on my flight to
really?
London, I was literally in one of the back alleys, just like trying to smoke as much as I could before my flight as like a challenge to myself. I was with some of my friends, and like it was just ridiculous how high I was on that plane.
On the plane.
I slept for like the entire trip. Yeah. Anyway, but that's just like to demonstrate like I don't know if Melbourne like
Yeah.
what would have happened because I was not in a good place at all.
Okay, so I'm really interested because
I didn't even know the date of my flight, like the day before my flight, because I couldn't have
that's so
cared.
funny. That's so funny. I mean, you and I both lived outside and kind of, to a certain degree, found ourselves,
Mm,
outside of Melbourne. And we both had very different kind of teenage years and whatnot. But
mm.
I certainly, having come back this year, for instance, and you coming back now at the start, not that there isn't a place for me, I couldn't build a place, but I certainly struggle with Melbourne. I think it's because I struggle with maybe my childhood or something. It's just a representation of that. But how do you compare for yourself Paris versus Melbourne in Australia?
Okay, I've learned now to appreciate Melbourne a lot more. When I
Hmm.
first came back from Paris, I was like, this is ugly. This
Yeah.
is gross. Why is it windy? Like, I was happy to see people, but I was like looking at the buildings, like almost stuck up way. Like, I've just lived in Paris. What on earth is this?
Yeah.
But now I have an appreciation because I really like how multicultural, like obviously Paris is super multicultural, but it's also so old, whereas Melbourne is newer as a city, so therefore like the multiculturalism is more prevalent in terms of like you have just so many different influences in especially like I'm in basically in the city
Yeah.
at the moment. So I really like that element of it. And also just like the people here, you can't, no matter how far you travel, if you have friends and family primarily in one spot, then you can't replace that elsewhere.
I know that's the hard because for me it's a bit different because my Paris is Guatemala
Yeah.
and it's not a city. Like
Yeah.
it's so detached from this reality that I'm not judging the buildings for being ugly. I'm judging for the buildings for being buildings and not fucking trees.
Trees.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's so I wasn't in a car for a few years. I'm like, and I just wonder, yeah, are there any actionable perspective changes, things you can, as you said, ladder into a row to help you make those transitions?
Well, I just think it's like you focus on why you are somewhere. So for Paris, I was there, but then almost like by the end of when I was living in Paris, I knew that unless I had a meaningful thing to do there because I didn't want to do the course I was doing there anymore, I knew that I didn't want to stay in Paris because Paris, I think, is my favorite city, amazing, but there's so many beautiful there's only so much of beautiful buildings. You then become accustomed to it, and it doesn't have I would still look up and be like, wow, every day, but it doesn't have, you need a meaning to it. Whereas in Melbourne, if I have a job and have, doing studies and have friends and people, then you don't get as tired and sick of it than if I'm just there for beautiful buildings, then that can get old quite quickly.
Yeah.
I needed something that would actually ground me there.
That's brilliant. And sorry I don't like interjecting myself in too much, but I'm
No,
asking
you.
this basically just for me. So,
Yeah.
um, that's actually really interesting because Guatemala, yeah, it did by the end
Mm,
when I didn't feel so much meaning in why I was there because I basically just wanted to be here.
yeah.
I didn't appreciate I could see the volcanoes are pretty and the
Yeah.
jungle's pretty, but I didn't appreciate it as much
Yeah.
as when I first got there and I had this big passion. And when I got back here, I've been struggling with finding that meaning, and I guess
Mm,
probably this podcast is what's come out of that. But this podcast isn't reliant on Melbourne,
yeah.
nor is
Which
it
is
reliant on the lake though. So now I'm
Yeah.
thinking I'm more,
I think that's a good thing though, because you can have some flexibility and exploration time.
while the meaning is coming from something like this, and then
Yeah.
that meaning will change,
Yeah. Because at
and
least you have a meaning in something. Because
yeah,
yeah, I just like you in Guatemala, I just recognize if I'm not going to do a year of uni here, this
yeah.
was great while uni was happening. But if I'm not doing uni here and I'm just here, then why am I here?
So for anyone who is struggling, I guess, with a bit of displacement,
Mm.
and that's not a lot of people, I think. Like people who have backpacked and traveled, I think, really suffer from it though. Just recognizing that you need to put the meaning and the purpose and the mission and the
Yeah.
vision.
Even if you're traveling, why do you want to go there?
Yeah.
Just to see a new city, yes, you can do that in half a day. You can probably see a city or some cities a day, whatever. But why you're actually there, I think is important.
Well, it's the difference between consumption and creating, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
really uh, consume less, create more.
yeah, like because you're just
Yeah,
consuming the beautiful buildings and
yeah,
consuming the nice hostel that's fun, and it's like that gets old real quick.
yeah,
And when
it
you're
does.
creating, you might be creating a relationship, or you might be creating a business, or
Hmm.
creating a whatever. Cool. Okay, that's really nice. I'm glad you said that. Do you want to talk any shit about Australia? Or like,
Yeah, I don't really like. I mean, Australia, a great country, but there's a lot of aspects about it I don't like. One
yeah.
thing I was very scared for coming back here, which is really funny now in the situation I'm in, but I was like, I'm never gonna find an Australian guy because I just thought they were all so shit that I was like, every man in Australia is banned off my radar, which is now funny because
What's
I'm
your
dating an
image?
Australian
What
guy.
in that mindset when you said that to yourself? What was your image of the Australian guy?
Just they were all the same to me, all so misogynistic as well.
Okay.
Just they were just all the same. They're like, yeah, I go to the gym on this day and then I drink beer on this day and then I either am a tradie or I work in an office. I wear the same
To be honest, from
clothes.
the outside, that is exactly what it is.
They all speak the same, dress the same, look the same. I'm literally and then they're the same guys that are like, all girls are the same. I'm like,
There
do
is,
you have no mirror?
mate, there is a fair bit of that in Australia. Hey, like it literally is so easy to get into that perspective, that surface level of tradie or office.
Yeah.
It's like,
And I'm not obviously it's hypocritical if they're saying all girls are the same and then I'm saying all of them are the same. But I'm just also saying that it's sometimes. Then when I came back, there are some interesting people, but
but they're easier to find overseas.
they're much more common in Europe or where I was.
Do you
It's
think
a
it's
lot more people are
because
interesting, and expats are usually interesting as
expats?
well.
Yeah, I think like the because if you compare it to Frenchmen or something, it's
Well,
like
Frenchmen, no,
no,
steer
okay,
clear of them as
there is no. Okay.
well.
'Cause I was about to
Absolutely
say,
not.
well, you're talking British guys, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just I don't know, yeah.
So,
French and Australian
but
are
is it just the
no.
novelty? Like French, obviously, are just all show and blah blah blah. But is it just the novelty of British guys? Because they're basically the same as Australian, no?
Yeah, it's not necessarily just British. It's just there's something about England though. First of all, the language helps that it's the same, and then American is just a different thing that you know, it's also a bit, I don't know, I don't,
American's the same as Aussie,
yeah, I don't,
just more extreme.
yeah. So Americans, but because there are so many of them, that it's like, I guess, easier to find interesting people because Australians, like, there's not that many in population, and then they are all
Yeah.
the same. Oh my God.
Oh,
And
that's so
then,
good.
well, like, not the, yeah, anyway.
Okay.
And then with British guys, I feel like for me, it just suited my interests. I thought at the time, now I have a lovely Australian guy, just to clarify. But at the time,
Shout out Ryan.
yeah. But at the time, I was like, they're, you know, usually more cultured. They like the education system I like over there. So therefore, like a lot of the intellectual stimulation could be there and a wider set of interests. Like there's not,
Yeah, and I think that's relevant for Aussie girls and British girls as well. Like, there's certainly many British
yeah,
girls that can fall into the trap of like fake tan and being
yeah.
half fake eyes, but like, there's plenty more, at least on that surface level, showing off what you show.
Mm.
Plenty more complexity, it would seem,
Yeah.
it would
But
appear.
that's just what I kind of perceived as Australia. Now that I'm in Australia more,
Yeah,
and then you can sort of figure out who you want to mingle with, I definitely think there are a lot of interesting people. It's just
yeah.
on a
It's harder to.
large
I think it's harder
scale.
to just see, and I think it's harder to show because
Yeah.
that dominant culture is so dominant.
Also because like people in Australia are so judgmental, I find like
Mm.
more than even the Parisians, which is bold statement.
That's interesting. How has that come up, and like, how have you seen that?
I just think like I think it's getting better because maybe we're a bigger city now. Like the bigger the city gets, usually the less judgment. Like you look at people walking around New York and London, and they're literally
Yeah,
like doing mad
yeah,
things.
yeah.
So it's I think yeah, the bigger a city gets, the less people start to judge and care.
Yeah. Okay.
But because Melbourne was smaller than Paris, like in Paris, if I walked out in a clown outfit, yes, the Parisians would probably judge me, but they're also like, I'm in Paris. So, like, people are going to do weird stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas here, if you walk out in a clown outfit, like, probably get arrested or something. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So, in this whole journey of like being through Paris and all that meant and that breaking free of everything, how was your relationship with loneliness and like yourself? Was that a
I
thing?
love spending time by myself. So that wasn't really a thing. Like, I can't,
Because you weren't. Because when I was living in Guatemala, I was in a hostel. Like, I was the opposite of
yeah.
lonely if I didn't want to be. You were
Um,
not that. You were in a little one bedroom apartment by
yeah, but
yourself.
I loved it. Oh my God. I think about that part all the time. Like, I wish I could just have the money and buy it and just have it as my not like forever home because I'm not going to raise kids in a family and that. It
Yeah.
was literally on an angle. Like, I mean, you people would get seasick walking around in my apartment and the mattress fell off every night
What?
because yeah, it would slope down because it wasn't tied down to anything. I'm not practical enough to actually
I
come
don't
up with
remember this.
solutions. I just deal with stuff. The mattress would slip off. It was a shocking bed, like actually the worst. I probably have back pain problems, I'm realizing now because of that year
Mm.
on that bed. And the whole place was sloped like this because it was,
What?
yeah.
I don't remember
No,
that. Like,
ask mum. She was
that's
like
mental.
shocked. Some people noticed it and some people didn't when they came in. I didn't notice it until someone told me.
Yeah.
And I was the one who was like, I didn't even think why my mattress was slipping off the bed. Didn't I was just like, yeah,
Yeah,
fair
that
enough.
happens. Yeah,
That
yeah. I'm
happens. Maybe
generally,
I'm moving a lot
yeah,
during my sleep.
I'm frying bigger fish over here. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, you can worry about the mattress. I'll worry about.
Yeah.
Um,
Literally.
okay, so like, because that year was like so big that you went into it, as you say, like on the plane, high as fuck, depressed, blah blah blah, and then you got like this huge relationship with a boy.
Yeah. Are we
So
talking about that?
you don't need to talk about the
Okay.
logistics, but that's a big change in at least your perspective of
Yeah.
love
Also
and
because I'd never
relationships.
had a relationship or anything
So,
close to.
what I want to, I guess, go on is your journey through your views of love and what it is and what are relationships.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um, we're talking not platonic, we're talking
relationships. Yeah.
relationship. My view is like,
What was it, and then what did it?
oh, my view was I had no idea. Like I actually just thought I would never have a boyfriend. I
Did
was
you see
shocked.
like the Disney Channel boyfriend thing?
Yeah, but I kind of thought it was like so I don't know why I never associated myself with that. Like I
Okay.
just and I was the kind of person that was told by people like this is not a bad thing for people telling me this, but like I was so far from that people would be like I could never see you in a relationship. I could
Yeah.
never see you having a boyfriend because I wasn't very affectionate. I wasn't very like open or vulnerable. I was kind of just the I don't know how I would describe myself, but I definitely wasn't that was actually my biggest thing with going into my first relationship was I did not know how to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
I then tried one night.
How did that look?
That looked like me crying on the end of the bed in a bowl, just trying to say anything I could.
So what were you like? What are your definitions of vulnerable and not vulnerable at that point?
Like, I mean, I like just would didn't talk about anything I was thinking, feeling, had been through. It was literally just like,
So
you
what did
know,
you talk about?
so like you go on a date and you might talk about whatever people talk about, like TV shows or like
Yeah.
that clothes store or where we're going, this ice cream that we're eating. Like it's very experienced in the present,
Yeah.
not what are you thinking about that ice cream that you're eating. It's nothing like that. But then it obviously naturally when you're with someone for a period of time, you kind of have to know what they're thinking and feeling. So then, but I started off to be because I didn't know how to be talk about things up front, I would do it in either a joking way or I would just say things that were on my mind, but it wouldn't be anything personal. It would
Mm.
be, say, like noticing something that was a thought, yes, but it wasn't like related to me. Or if it was, it would be quite like,
This sounds like the evolution of language from like ooh ooh
yeah.
to like
No, but it
starting to
started like,
formulate words
it
like a
developed like quite slowly, I would say, but in terms of like how I acted in a relationship, but then it started I was getting more comfortable saying what I wanted to say. So then I would just say things that like maybe just showed more of I don't know, I would talk about my interests and things like
Mhm.
but I remember him saying that this is the most emotionally disconnected relationship he's ever had.
Wow.
And I didn't know.
Which one was it? Was this the first very
No, that wasn't I didn't count
okay,
that as
cool.
relationship.
Yeah.
This was like my first actual
Yeah.
relationship. And yeah, he told me that it was over the phone. He was like, this most emotionally disconnected relationship I've ever had.
Yeah, wow.
And that was like when we were like 4 or 5 months into dating. So like, and like that's not even just knowing each other because I um did not want to, I don't know, get into a relationship. So both of my relationships have been I didn't want them. And
Mm.
then the guys was like, persistent enough to like not in a bad way, not in like a
Mm.
weird creepy way, but like persistent enough to be like no, like this could be a good thing. And then yeah. Anyway, what were we saying?
So
My
your
perspective.
perspective of love and
Oh
relationships
yeah.
has been a journey of becoming vulnerable.
Yeah.
Was that just because you felt that was necessary to hold that connection?
Yeah, like I just now looking back, I thought at the time very differently about the relationship than now that I'm in, I would say a much better relationship that and it wasn't a bad he wasn't a bad guy. Sorry. He wasn't a bad guy, it wasn't a bad relationship at all. It was just like how I acted was very I didn't know how to act.
Mm.
So yeah, I wasn't vulnerable at all. I think the most vulnerable moment I had was when we just said bye to each other
Yeah.
was like the most vulnerable I had been.
Mm.
And probably him as well the entire time. And that's like the last second, last minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously that's like not really
And that must
very
have been so
beneficial.
painful, I think, holding on to that. As in, you kind of, if you know a breakup's coming,
Yeah.
ideally you want it to be like, ah, blah, blah, and then you kind of want it to,
Yeah, no, this was
emotionally
like
you want
one
it to
of
pivot
the
out, but you want,
emotionally like
you cranky it
heightened, yeah,
right to,
cranking it right at the end and then saying goodbye, never seeing them again. I was distraught, like
yeah,
distraught and delusional after this breakup for months. And you witnessed
I remember.
some of that. I
Yeah.
was a bit psychotic. Um, Yeah.
Really? How did that come out?
Oh my God. Do you remember when I would like go on street cameras in Paris?
No.
Oh my God. I would like, you can go onto street cameras and I would try and like
Oh, oh, so you can go on like live camera
live
feeds
footage. I
of
would do
Paris
a
and you'd
bunch of,
see where he
yeah,
might
I
be.
would do a bunch of stuff. Like
Oh, Charlotte, that's fucked.
I was actually out of my mind. I was like writing. I went through, do you remember how many journals I went through?
Uh,
Oh my God, I went to Kmart and got like the $5 or $10 like just plain
yeah,
journal things. I think I went through like one a month, but they're like a
like
lot
100
of
pages, kind
pages.
of.
No, they're
Yeah.
like yeah, like 100, 200 pages of just like
But this is so interesting because obviously this is not to take away from that guy, but it's not really about him, is it?
no.
It's about your relationship with yourself and loving yourself and being vulnerable and realizing your emotions. And I think what I'm starting to learn about relationships is they're that mirror, they're that person that almost inspires you. By loving someone else, you're almost inspired to do the actions and feel the
Mm,
things and share and be open in that
yeah.
way, which was really for yourself, right?
Yeah. Like now I feel so much better because I from the start, kind of once I realized what opening up and being emotional felt like with someone else in that last second, then I didn't want a relationship when I came back because I was in my head thinking we were going to get back together and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And like literally when I met Ryan, my current boyfriend, one of the first things I told him was that I'm quote loyal to my ex.
Yeah, I remember
So
that. That was in the club or something, wasn't it?
that was we met at a Halloween party and
Yeah.
I was drunkenly ranting about my ex for like the entire
What does
time.
Ryan talk about that? Does he ever mention that? I mean, that must. There's no denying that must at least pain his ego.
He's actually just so secure. I just don't think he cares. Like
But
I think
there's
at
a
the no
version of him that
at
cares,
the
though.
start he was like I didn't necessarily want to go on a date with you because I thought you hung up on your ex, like
Yeah.
obviously, and I was like, well, that's very valid. I wouldn't have gone on a date with me, but I think his friends kind of I didn't want to go on a date. He didn't really want to go on a date. Our friends kind of
Mm.
somehow convinced us. And it was also just like a casual date. Like I didn't think anything would happen
This is
from
the
it.
sushi one. Oh no, that
No.
was way back.
No, this was Italian.
Italian, that's right.
Italian lunch. But
Yeah,
no, it was just like I just thought nothing of it. I was just like,
yeah.
oh whatever, I'll go on this thing.
And honestly, it's so funny because I've actually been playing around with this thought for a few days, ironically, but it's not not revolutionary. Expectation versus reality.
Yeah.
And it's just like your happiness is the gap between those. And
Yeah.
that's really caught me out. I was talking to Ted about it this morning, but in relationships as well. Like, for instance, my relationship, like, from my end, huge expectation, like
Hmm.
the biggest expectation,
Yeah. Mine was opposite, like
right?
zero
So
expectations. I was like,
the reality might be
nothing.
good, but it's not that expectation.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's like almost doomed, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
I think it's a lot harder to start with expectations
yeah,
because then you're a lot more likely to be disappointed
but that's also
than
that's
pleased.
when you were talking about your like becoming socially like
Yeah.
adept, that's actually where my mind went as well because you had no expectation, you had no talent
Mm,
almost. So you've had to learn it from scratch, and therefore
mm.
you kind of just keep on going, and you actually get really good. I've seen
Yeah.
that in
I would say
sales.
I've gotten a lot better at like
Yeah.
social interactions now. Like now, like if someone doesn't, not in like a self-absorbed way, but if someone doesn't like me straight off the bat, I'm like, oh,
Mm.
like I wonder why kind of thing,
Yeah.
not like a just because I feel like I've made my first impression
Okay, good.
usually quite
Okay.
good that
It,
I'm like, huh, they're being a bitch. Why?
yeah, it's a reflection, right? It's a projection. There's so many times. I mean, I guess the point is that I've seen people who aren't naturally talented or aren't good at the start, whether it's sales, whether it's my free diving, for instance, and for whatever reason, if they decide to stick with it, they become way better than the
Mm,
people who were originally talented because they had to learn every step of the way.
yeah,
So they've actually got those because it's all the basics, it's the foundations, it's the first
yeah.
principles that are relevant, and you've had to learn those really strong.
Mm-hmm. But
Yeah.
yeah, with the relationship perspective view, like now just entirely different to what it was like a year ago.
So
Like
what is it now?
now it's just like I'm, well, first and foremost, so much more vulnerable and open, like
Yeah.
all the time if I have. a thought or concern or anything, then it's like
Well, I mean, evidence right here.
immediately brought up. But yeah, and also I just have become therefore a lot more okay with being vulnerable and open and like yeah, just not having that like I don't know why I had such like a shame and embarrassment about showing myself too much.
Hmm.
Um and so yeah, that's sort of dissipated and yeah, also just like that you should be sort of laughing and having fun and it's not if you like I like spending time on my own a lot, but if you'd rather spend time on your own than with that person, then you probably shouldn't be with them. If
Hmm.
as someone who really loves to spend time on her own, but now I'm living with him and
Hmm.
like I do still like time on my own, but then I would rather him be there
Hmm.
and just like presence and company, which I think is for me really important because I do just like really like time on my own. It
That's a
needs to
very
be
cool
someone who,
question to ask. That's a cool,
yeah.
I don't know
I
what the
think
word is.
it's, yeah, especially relevant to people that like love alone time. Like I genuinely
Yeah.
can't express enough
Because I
how
think
much
a
I
lot
love
of
alone
people, yeah, a
time.
lot of people would just rather spend time with anyone than be alone,
Yeah,
right? So it's a very bad like test.
yeah,
But if you're that introvert, they would rather, yeah, it's a good
yeah. Then it's a good
measuring
thing.
stick.
Yeah,
Mm.
because also you can want to see some like when living with someone, it changes that as well because if you're kind of like feel suffocated by them being around all the time and want space, then like that's just not gonna work at all. Yeah.
Nice. And how has it been like you supporting him, him supporting you in your path towards the future?
Well, I think we both are quite like aligned and we've kind of had it from the get-go. When we established, it took a few months to
Hmm.
establish what was going on. I was still in a bit of like muddled minds and things like that. And then, yeah, when we sort of established what was going on, then it kind of from there, from the get-go was quite like a set understanding and talked about understanding mutually about what we actually want out of this relationship and then where that how that happens and what that leads to like sort of like we both want very long term relationships like date to marry
Yeah.
relationship type thing and so that was sort of just like yeah
Yes.
set from the go and then we kind of just like established that more and more the
Yeah.
more we're together.
I definitely have a lot to learn from you in that regard. Or maybe Ryan, I don't know who led the charge, but
I would say I'm like definitely like a date to marry type of person.
yeah.
Like anyone I'm dating, I've like been like, oh my God, they're the one I'm gonna marry.
Yeah, no, same, but just like the way to go about
Yeah.
that. I've
Whereas like and then but I think it's also nice to have it so mutually like
yeah.
set in stone, like there's no doubts from the other thing that's like and we do
But also like so if that's mutually like, yeah, we if things keep on going this way, we'll get married. How do you not extrapolate that out and kind of rush the process?
that's my problem.
Yeah.
That's literally my issue is that I'm like, okay, well, if we both want to do this, we just do it now.
Exactly,
But
because I'm
like,
like, are you as crazy as me? Do you want to just jump off the cliff next week?
yeah,
Like,
I think what stops from doing that is that I do like my thing that stops me from doing that is, well, if I only want to get engaged once, because I do only want to get engaged once to this one guy, then if it's only happening once and I want to savor that, like if I'm gonna get married once and once it's happened, I won't have it.
yeah.
So I should like draw it out because once I've had a wedding, then I won't get another wedding.
Charlotte, that's very smart. That's probably what I wanted to hear a year ago. Yeah. Yeah,
Because
that's
I really like I do want to to be married, but also like fun things like the wedding. Not that that's why I'm getting married to have a wedding, but
yeah.
those kind of things that I've been dreaming of since a kid. If it's done, then it's done.
That's so smart because I'm such a fucking greedy bastard in terms of life stuff. I'm like, nah, fuck it. If it's there, like, let's go. Like, it's like,
Yeah,
because there's so much to do. So I'm like,
yeah.
okay, we can do it. Okay, that tick
Yeah.
next. Like,
Also, I want to test them like in every sort of realm before
yeah,
I get engaged or anything like that. So I think that takes a while to be able to like sort of test yourself and your relationship in different settings. Like living together, that's a test. Long distance, that's a test I've done. Um,
Yeah.
but then there's all, and like grief is one, and then there's just like a lot of different tests. Is like how patient can someone be? Like I feel like you need to get into a really, really difficult situation with that person that requires a lot of patience and understanding and see what happens, and all those things can take a while. A few of those things were like very condensed for us, which is why I think we are quite like sure of each other, because there were like in the first 6 months
That's thrown
a
at
lot
yeah.
of
Yeah.
those
That's
tests.
so smart. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay, I'm gonna rewatch that. I'm gonna make that a clip just for myself. Um, Now, the female species,
Yeah,
absolute mystery, right?
yeah.
One thing that, and you're the first girl. That's
Woo.
just not. One thing that you've said before, but I wanted you to re-say and reframe is the difference between male friendships and female
Oh,
friendships,
yeah.
because this blew my
You
mind.
loved this. You
Yeah,
thought this
yeah,
was profound.
yeah.
I
It
found it.
is. It is
And it's
just
so basic, but it's so
absolutely revolutionary to me. So, like male friendships, everyone, males, females, all know that male friendships are great, and like you're either friends or you're not. And if something happens, metaphorically or physically, just punch them in the face, and then you're
Also,
brothers
male
again.
friendships are very loyal. They're very good. Like, this is not shitting on male friendships. I think they're so important. I
Yeah.
love, like, Ryan's group of friends,
Mm.
great group of friends. Like, you know what
Yeah,
I
and you
mean?
can have like the broke guy, and then you have the adventurer, and then you have the
Yeah.
businessman, and
It's
you're
like
all still.
solidarity.
Who cares? Like
Yeah.
you're all just monkeys, and I think every guy recognize themselves as a fucking dumb monkey boy. And with you
Yeah.
guys, you can just
I
be that.
love also as a girl, seeing guys as in their friends act with each other.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous. Like the like stunts they pull and like things to make each other laugh is like really funny from an outside perspective to watch, like
yeah,
the type of things that go on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How is that different to female friendship?
Yeah. So female friendships, especially my experiences
Mm,
with really close, like I'm talking like the best friend
yeah,
female, or like even just like a tight knit group or whatever, is literally like you were dating them. So it's like a platonic relationship. I see it as like it's not romantic. Like you're not doing all the same things that you would be doing in a relationship, but it's like almost like 80-90%
but
of the way
honestly,
there.
cultural. This is actually groundbreaking for me because I think everyone in at least our culture recognizes this as true because if a guy, does anything sexual with a guy, he's gay.
Yeah.
Like full stop. But if a girl does anything, kisses, whatever with a girl, she's not just immediately a lesbian.
No,
There's
because
a
they're
there's a
so
big
close.
razor
Because it
because
kind of makes sense. Because it's like, but you're so
and
close.
I've
How would it not happen
right and I've
almost?
never actually had that told to me that female friendships are 80% of the way to a
Oh my God. Like
relationship.
being like, because I kind of thought that, but then I hadn't been in a relationship. Being in a relationship now, and I'm like, yeah, like some of my female friendships, like inseparable. I've lived with
Yeah.
one of my best friends. I've, spent every day with them, and it's like talking about really in-depth things, sharing thoughts, sharing lives, like doing like basically going on dates together. Like girls just going, like I'm going on a date with my friend tonight, but like we're not like
Yeah.
in that relationship zone. But you know what I mean? Like girls will like catch up every day and like go to the movies together and do all those like relationship things and be so, so, so close.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and it's just a whole different level. Like you actually just feel like you are dating them.
that is
And
mental.
and a guy, like if one of them gets a boyfriend, it's almost like betrayal because it's like that's a wedge between us. What is he doing here? That's our relationship.
Yeah. It's you're cheating.
Yeah.
Monogamous, like or not monogamous,
Yeah, like I
whatever.
definitely had that. Sandrine, my best friend, when she was dating a
Yeah.
guy, we were almost like we were always hanging out as a three, but then it became such a weird dynamic because then like is she supposed to take his side or my side in arguments? Like I would argue with him all the time. I was like, what is going on right now? Like if you listen to some of the conversations in the car, like it was just like yelling matches sometimes. Like honestly, just like he was like, I'm dating this girl. Why the hell is she
Yeah,
like?
but you don't understand. I'm dating her too.
Yeah, literally, that was like me. I would basically have fights with him and arguments with him because I just was like, well, I've known her longer. I introduced you to.
Yeah.
So, like, therefore,
Like, this is one of the things, and I was saying this the other day, like, there's so many things, and this is why I think I consume so many podcasts and they're great, and because it's not necessarily new information. It's not like blowing my mind understanding wise. It's not
it's
gonna
just
alien. It's just like,
articulating it.
yeah, articulating something that I already
Yeah.
knew, but it's like, oh,
Wow. Yeah. And when you find it, it's like a tick. It's like, oh
yeah.
my God, that's what
It's
it
like
was.
glasses on.
Oh,
Oh,
someone said something like that the other day. And it was really, oh my
it's
God,
like
I
an
can't
earworm. You have an
remember.
earworm, and someone plays the song and tells you,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that felt
I
good.
had this thought that I
Tickled my brain.
articulated the other day, which I was kind of telling you. This is like the sentence or whatever, the synopsis that I got out of my notebook just
Hmm.
earlier. But I had this thought which I couldn't articulate beforehand. But it was a thought that, like, when you're a child or teen, you're sort of fragmented by your interests and what you hate and what you love and, like, your experiences, but you're, like, more fragmented. And then the older you get, the more that cements into an identity of who you are as a human.
Okay.
But then I think that that can be a bad thing sometimes because when you have that sort of solid, like, this is who I am, one, you can become more stubborn in this is who I am and less accepting
And
of new
I'm not. I'm
things.
saying yes to this so strongly, so I'm saying no to other things.
Yeah, whereas when you're a kid, you can, like, you're just
Say maybe to
fragmented in
everything.
like this little. Whereas if you become cemented, but then also I think when you become sort of cemented in, I was trying to articulate how to say this, like as if you now are whole and on the planet Earth and a human, then the concept of this is so like off topic, but the
Hmm.
concept of say death and not being on the planet becomes a lot more like incomprehensible and a
Oh.
lot more sorry,
Yeah.
a lot more scary. And I think a lot of people get scared of death and things like that because they become so whole in themselves that they can't imagine or fathom breaking away from that because they, just are so glued to it as their identity, as their core, as their center.
Right.
Um,
I get that. This is my, and tell me if I'm misstepping here or like not interpreting it right. But you're kind of saying that almost as a shield, as a way to navigate the world, which is so complex and so difficult in so many ways, we funnel our identities into a certain few things and almost a rule system, operating system of this is who I am, this is how I go through that difficult, complex world. Now, the stronger that is, the more success I can maybe get
mm,
in doing so. But it's also, I'm tying myself into this, which A, closes me off to a lot of complexity in the world and
mm,
beauty and whatnot, but also B, means I'm really tied into this. And my
yeah,
spirit, my consciousness,
yeah,
whatever it is tied into being a tradie or being
yeah.
a rich
It's like
person or
your
being a.
soul. Like I'm talking like soul level, like
Yeah.
because you're then so like say you're like a CEO at this company and you've worked your whole life and dedicated everything and this is your identity. And then like what one day you die and you just like leave that and then it's like I was just thinking about it because I was thinking about the concept of if someone told you you had like 20 days to live or something and you know how it would be something so hard to comprehend and struggle with. But I think that if you have less cemented like on this earth and you're kind of floating more as a soul being that's experiencing this earth and then going to do something. But if you are like one with this planet and like one with this life, then I think that that would be so challenging. So I almost want to avoid that and kind of stay in this like limbo of like every day comes as it comes. Yes, I'm going to strive for other things, but my soul is like here and I'm grateful for another day, if that makes kind of sense,
Yeah.
and not cement
I,
myself to the idea of like my whole worth and meaning is on earth. Like it's
I
more
completely get you, and I've heard it before
okay.
from. um, and I've been told that, for instance, I am more likely to be in your words connected to the earth because I'm
Mm,
driving and striving to
yeah,
do things. Yet, at least as a guy in current societal model
yeah, you kind of
roles,
have to.
to a certain degree, you kind of have to. I think
Yeah,
girls have more liberty, and I think that's why.
we've talked about this because I
Yeah,
definitely agree
exactly.
that
I
there's a
think
lot of pressure
the feminine is
on guys for that.
is so much more beautiful and so much more flowing. It's guys wouldn't do anything if girls didn't exist. Like literally everything, every single thing guys do
And
was
I
for
find that
girls.
so funny because the things that guys criticize about girls, girls would be doing 10 times harder if guys didn't exist. And I'm
Right.
talking like, I heard this, I think, on a podcast or something,
Yeah.
and it was like, guys were, shaming girls for their slutty clothes. And the girl was like, okay, but we don't do it for you because if guys didn't exist, girls would be in the skimpiest short skirts. And I was like, that's so true.
Yeah.
We'd all be wearing glitter and pink and like nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the kind of weird thing, isn't it? Because all the thing that makes life worth living is the feminine.
Mm.
And then the guys would love to fall into that and would love to be feminine, just prancing around the world and be on the land and sexual and whatever it is. But then we'll get eaten by lions.
Yeah. Do you
So
think
to
guys sometimes can be jealous of that
100%,
feminine,
oh,
like,
100, that's why the masculine attacks it
mm,
because it hasn't figured out a way to create space for it within itself.
yeah,
So if the masculine is so self-conscious in that sense, then it's gonna hurt the feminine. And
mm,
I think that's why in this current world we're living in where it is so masculine dominated, we're killing the environment, for example, because that is the ultimate feminine.
that's so interesting, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost like there's probably a lot of hurt little boys
Yeah,
at the very top, whether
yeah.
they're oil
And I
tycoons or
remember mum
CEOs or
teaching me, and
yeah,
I think you've overheard this as well, is that she's basically told me, like, just don't break boys' hearts, like, if you can avoid it, because I think it does, like, they carry that with
of
them.
course. And when they do float to the top,
Yeah.
for that heartbreak, that oh my God, she abandoned me, she broke my heart, whatever. When they carry that to the top and they're CEO of a mining company,
Yeah,
they'll
then
be
they
like,
are
I'm
destructive.
so like
Yeah.
she'll regret it. She'll come back to me. The next one won't leave or cheat on me
Yeah.
if I make $1 billion.
Like it's definitely, I think that was a good lesson for my mum is like, be careful of
Yeah.
breaking a boy's heart. Like just do it very gently because I honestly, with that type of thing, it's so sensitive that they can like carry that as a scar for
Mm.
a long time. Whereas I think girls are better at healing that type of
Yeah.
thing. Even rejection, like if someone comes up to me on the street and asks for my number, then it's like I will try and be nice and polite because some guys will just take that rejection and be like, this is why, this is like their villain origin story.
Literally. And
Literally, like they will take that as like
yeah.
their one last rejection before they're like, fuck all women, I'm gonna,
Man, it's happening all the time, and that's what we're seeing in the culture, right? That's why Andrew Tate's so attractive. That's why these things, because every boy is nurtured by their mum, and then somewhere in their teenage years,
no,
well,
slow
yeah,
up.
like the story is like, and then somewhere in the teenage years, you realizes that you can be a boy forever, like in your mum's cradle, but you're gonna have to go out, and the world
Yeah,
doesn't give a shit about you.
yeah.
So then you have to make yourself a man who's then earned the love and respect of a woman, and then you can be soft, but
Mm,
you can be soft in the home, but like, you still have to hold that
yeah.
like it's a really weird situation. I think it's one that the reason why there's so much stuff about it now is because there was always a clear path,
Mm,
whether it's a tribalistic context, whether it's the Romans, you're a soldier and then you're a businessman, you're a politician. Like there was always an obvious route, and now it's so unclear. And
and there's
now,
so many options. When there's too many options, fig tree analogy, the bell jar.
what's the
Um,
fig tree analogy?
oh my God. Okay, this is like feminine literature core.
Yeah.
But anyway, Sylvia Plath, um, the fig tree analogy is basically that when there's so many options and so many branches, you'll just sit there and let the figs drop and die because you can't decide. Like, if there's too many options,
Which fig do I pick?
yeah, which fig do I pick? What do I do? It's just too much, and you
Hmm.
just like, that's not exactly what it is, but it's basically like,
Yeah.
it's a really good, if you look up the fig tree analogy, it's
Hmm.
like in her novel, The Bell Jar, and it's a really, really good way of looking at how just overwhelming if you don't know what to do and have too many interests and have too many options, then
Yeah.
it's a struggle.
Is there anything, just because we got on the topic and it's one of my favorite topics and I don't want to take over and rant, is there anything from your perspective as a very attractive young female,
Thank you.
right? Like, what advice would you say, not to Ryan, but what advice would you say to the other 20-year-old boy who,
Okay. I was actually
yeah,
thinking of this as you were talking. One thing that women struggle with, which I don't know if men are super aware of, is that whole like, if men are nurtured by their mothers and have
mm,
good mothers, then they're almost in a partner, a female. There's a very fine line between getting that nurturing care from a woman of like that kind of reminds you of that maternal, like you come home from a work day and you might have a meal cooked and hugs and cuddles and whatever. But then there's a very fine line between that and then there's also when that goes too far, it's so fine. There can be then like treating her like a mother.
mm.
And a lot of boys do this where they'll have that maternal feeling, so then they'll start treating her like a mother. And if she starts nagging like a mother, then he resents her like he would his mum for nagging. And then it becomes that loses attraction because you're not like attracted to your mother. So that loses that spark and attraction if it's a mother son relationship. That's not what the woman wants. That's like it just
So how do guys go about avoiding that?
avoiding that by not acting like the son, by acting like a partner, like like a leader. Like a son doesn't lead around his
Yeah,
mum.
yeah.
Um, so just being, like
That's interesting
a
because
partner.
when I was in Guatemala, I was independent of, parents' mum for the first time. And I felt way more in that sense, like able to hold space for a woman in that sense.
Mm,
Coming back to Melbourne, I'm suddenly I'm not living with her and stuff, but just I'm under the shadow. I'm in the same city. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm not on my own 2 feet. And I felt it a lot more difficult. And there's all sorts of reasons, but maybe that's a subconscious, really strong one of what's your relationship with your mother? Where is that
Hmm.
at?
Yeah. I think it's, sorry to interrupt,
No,
but I
but
think if guys also have a very strong relationship with their mother, then they have higher expectations for their future partners.
that's a wild one.
Yeah, like I think
Yeah.
the expectations if the how the mother treats the son is kind of how he expects to be treated.
Okay.
And then with that, that can also be a bad thing because then if she sort of matches up with that, then he can, I think, easily fall into the trap of being the adorable son that his mother worships, which girls don't want that. They don't want to have a
Yeah.
son. They don't want a kid. They want a man.
Yeah, mad. Again, this is stuff I'm gonna have to replay because Charlotte, you're dropping wisdom.
Thanks.
Um, awesome. Now you mentioned fem literature. You are studying literature,
I'm studying literature,
and
yes.
from going how many years without reading a book?
I don't know. It would be like from when I was maybe 10 until 18, 8 years maybe.
Wow. Okay.
I did read books here and there. Like
Yeah.
I read Call Me By Your Name when I was like 16 or 17 or something.
Yeah.
That was really, really good. That was one of my favorite books for a long time, but it was very, very rare. I'd maybe read one book a year,
Yeah.
whereas now it's very
So other
a lot
than
more than that.
breaking the mold out of depression, like what is literature giving you? Why do you want to study it and devote time and energy into it?
Yeah.
And why should other people perhaps?
Well, I've always loved books, even though there was that gap. Mum has this funny story of like in kindergarten before I could read, she would see me just in the corner of the class holding a book upside down, pretending
Mm.
I could read. I've always loved them. Our grandmother, she would read to me a lot of books. And do you remember Mum reading that Brit- British history book
Oh
before we
yeah.
went to bed?
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
loved that. I was obsessed with that book.
Yeah.
And I still remember some of the stories from that. So, like, history and books and all that type of thing. For context, this was like a non-fiction, like
Yeah, it was
historical.
just like the kings and queens and shit, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
loved it. Um,
And no,
and it was also
Our
like,
Island Story.
yeah,
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 yeah, that's it. And it was them conquering.
yeah.
It was the British conquering and wars and battles and oh my god. Anyway, so yeah, it was oh my god. But it was a lot of that when I was younger. A lot of history. I loved history. And then now I like literature because well, I just love books because I think I've told you before, but to me they're like a superpower. Like you can mind read into the author's mind or the character's mind or multiple different you can travel to different universes, planets, cities, wherever. So you can teleport, mind read, shape shift. You can you can time like a time travel.
Yep, that's
Yep.
pretty good.
There's
This is a good sales shot.
thank you. You can basically like you pick up literally paper and your imagination just becomes a superpower.
What did
And
I see something the other day? It was pick up dead trees with scrolls on it,
yeah,
and
and
you're lucid
teleported.
dreaming.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
just tripping. Yeah.
And it's insane. And you learn so much. Like, it's just, like, I love movies and all forms of entertainment, but it's entertainment that you're kind of doing with yourself. Like, you're doing it internally, you're not doing it externally and watching someone else's um, production. Like, you're producing it yourself, you're doing it in your own head and with the author. It's like a collaborative thing. So that's why I think it's really important that if you really like an author and then you kind of almost have a bond with that author and the characters that they make, and then you get inspired to write things. Like, I like writing, and one of the books I'm reading now, I don't think it's the greatest book ever, but it's just really sparked. Like, it's so weird and so different from anything I've ever heard of before. Like, the
Yeah.
type of things in this book, I'm like, this author needs to be in a psych ward immediately. But it sparks so much creativity because it's so different.
Yeah.
And so it's really just like, for me, I just find it so fun as well. I like, there's nothing better to me than like if it's actually just entertainment and fun as well, which I really like. And then I'm learning from it. Like with, say, literature, it's a lot of classics and things like that, which I find entertaining because they're really good stories. Like, I'm reading Frankenstein as well. And, you know, Mary Shelley, the author,
She was 17.
yeah, and she just came up with it because she was like dared to make a ghost story because like
That's right.
there was a windy storm
Yeah.
and she was so young.
That's such a good book and like literature study, is
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
And so they made this little like fun competition and she obviously won. But yeah, just really cool that she just came up with that and now it's one of the greatest classics of all time. And you get also this moral value. I think you get a lot of perspective on different people's situations because you go out of yourself. So I think it's like, I don't really like focusing too much internally on myself and my experiences. I find it quite relaxing to go into someone else's brain and their experiences because it's just escaping. Not that I have much to escape from. I love my life,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just relaxing going outside of yourself. You don't have to think about when's my next work shift. Like, no, you're thinking about what you're doing in Antarctica.
You know what? I actually had, because it's what we are just talking about, this vision of it's almost like a guy needs to go out into the world and somehow carve out a living or whatever to then like create the little bubble space for a girl to just be able to do shit like read.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like an almost like
Yeah.
if that can be the case, that's an awesome
Yeah.
idea.
Oh my
'Cause I
God.
feel like it's just so good at
But
being wise and shit.
oh, I just love books. Like, genuinely, it's like a almost like a hunger though. It's bad. Like, I'll be like guiding to a book and I'm so excited for the next one. And like this, but my issue is like I can be satisfied with a lot of things. I'm definitely one of those people. Like, what I like about myself, one of my favorite traits is that, you know, if I'm happy right now, I'm not the kind of happy which is like, oh, I'm so happy, I wish I had more of this. I'm the kind of happy that is like, I'm so happy and content with this that even if it all went away this second, I'd be happy I had it.
Wow.
Like,
Okay.
type of satisfied with stuff, except for books. Books, I'm like, no, give me more, please.
Okay.
So it's like I can never read all the books that have ever been written, and that annoys me.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like that passion for that is quite separate from how I view other things because, yeah, as I said, like if everything was taken away from me right now, I would just be happy I had it and like be like continue with the happiness from that instead of wanting more. But yeah, books, no, I need more. I need to know more as well because knowledge, like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything.
Yeah.
And that I definitely resonate with.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Good stuff. Oh my God. Yeah. Unreal. Wow. Mm,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Is there anything else? I know you touched on it before, but I mean, you're only 20, right? I
Mm.
think if anyone has watched this, I would really. Um, is there anything in this process of growing up and then, like, have a few, not a lot, but a few years of seeing yourself change, the world change and stuff? Is there anything that you think into the future, project forward, any bits of wisdom? You know how like when kids don't
Mm.
get that wisdom gleaned out of them because everyone just they're kids. And
Yeah.
I think that happens to 20-year-old girls a lot as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything where someone in power or someone who should know something that you feel like and
Mm.
they might not? Is there anything like that
I just feel
comes to mind?
like there's a lot of pressure that people don't even consciously realize is happening to them, that there's a lot of pressure on just how they should act and everything like that, and to really just do what you want to do and completely like block it out, if that makes sense. Like, not completely block it out, maybe, but like, say everyone is like, you should be, studying and doing this and having a career, not saying you shouldn't be doing that. But if you want to go camping and turn off your phone for a second and just like that feels right for you, like just do that. Honestly, everyone should just go camping. That's my advice, is go camping and turn off your phone for a week and then come back to me and tell me how you want your life to look. Not to me, because you know what I mean? Like, then reevaluate, like do like a journal of before and after you went camping, but like to a good camping spot. Like, don't go to a patch of dirt. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm resisting the urge to add on because I think that's such a great way to end.
Yeah, and that's very like fitting to you as well.
Yeah.
Is just switch off your phone, be around people that you like, have deep conversations, good conversations, like just say anything on your mind, write it down, do whatever. Spend time on your own as well and with nature, and then reevaluate.
Unreal, Charlotte.
Cool.
Unreal.
I want to go on a camping trip if you can't tell.
Yeah, I'm going on one next week.
Oh, lovely. I'm
All
going
right.
alone,
Oh, yeah?
not camping.
Cool. That was fucking epic.
Yeah, that was fun.
Mm. The lighting's sick, hey?
Yeah. Hopefully it shows up well.
Hopefully it's safe.
Anyway, bye guys.
Uh,